Good afternoon, folks, and thank you everybody who's hanging on the post-lunch session on the third day of the conference. Very excited to chat with you, Jim, and you, Rachna, today. I think the title is pretty apt, and I was hoping that in our conversation we could really cut through a lot of what the hype cycle is and really get down to what we're seeing as the practical uses and impacts we're seeing in AI, in particular in medtech. So thank you for joining. I thought that maybe we'd kick off starting with you, Rachna, if you could give a quick introduction.
Sure, absolutely. I'm one of those classic cases who couldn't make up her mind. So I'm an engineer by training, semiconductor engineer, moved to healthcare after running a tech startup, and then decided to leave big corporation to start my own fund. I invest in medical devices and AI-enabled healthcare platforms, very early stage.
Awesome. Hopefully you're all awake. We're really late in the day, but after lunch. But hey everyone, I'm Jim. I'm the CEO of a company called QOM. We're building what we're calling the healthcare cloud and empowering a new class of builders in healthcare called citizen developers, non-technical stakeholders that can build applications very quickly and secure applications that are HIPAA compliant. So very excited to be here. I've also been an investor, prior CEO of an exit, and also an engineering leader in a variety of companies, the last company being Verily. So very excited to be here, chat here, and have the conversation.
Thank you, Jim. And my name is Rob. I'm the founder, CEO of Qualio, and we are a quality and compliance acceleration platform for medtech companies. And we've had the great pleasure of supporting over 1,000 customers in accelerating paths to market, scaling quicker, and launching products faster than they've ever thought possible. So really excited to be here and share some of our learnings and chat with you both. A quick show of hands maybe before we dive in. Anybody here implementing AI either to drive efficiencies or to actually put into their products and services that they're giving to customers? Okay. About a third, I think. That was actually pretty good. Thank you. So maybe with that context, we have a good few people here who are tackling this. I thought the first conversation we could have is around the practical implementations of AI. And I know we've spoken in the prep session. There's a lot of ideas and thoughts and opinions here, but maybe I'd kick off with what we think the biggest misconception is. And Jim, you might take us off here and share some of your thoughts.
Yeah, so I mean, I like to look at AI as taking a step back with analogies. So I think of kind of the cycle we're at as LLMs are kind of like an operating system. So if you look at Microsoft, when they started their business, there's a PC in every home. If you look at today, it's kind of like everybody has an LLM in their pocket. You know, you have local LLMs, you have cloud-based LLMs. Everyone probably is accessing LLMs here. I could probably ask everyone, are you using LLMs? Everyone will say yes. So we look at kind of now operating system is out there and the application layer is when applications became useful. So Microsoft had PCs in every home. It wasn't until Microsoft Word or Microsoft Excel was in every home that actually households started to use PCs in a useful way. And we're starting to see that now, the application layer, be it the agentic application area we're in. It's like, building useful software applications is where you're going to see a lot of, exponential gains in the next few months. And so I don't know if that's a misconception, but I think a good framing for how I view it. And I think a lot of VCs and others are jumping on board there and very curious to hear what you have to say on this.
Yeah, to be very important, and Rob knows this about me, it's all very contextual, right?
Yep.
It depends on what application you're looking at, what problem you're trying to solve. So if I think about remote areas where you need to diagnose things and you may be off the grid, you need SLMs. You need small language models, you need edge computing that works on your device. And that's very device dependent. So any engineers in the room will understand that it's a software-hardware interaction. So if you change from an Apple device to actually, a Google device, the application layer will change slightly to adapt to that because the hardware is different. And if you're talking about mothership that is always connected all the time and it can access data 24/7, then absolutely go for LLM or a stripped down version of the big LLMs that are available as open source. On the other hand, when you think about AI in general, People started talking about AI and Gen AI when OpenAI released ChatGPT, but the reality is that AI and generative AI or predictive AI has been in the mix in the laboratories for the last 30 years. And there have been applications in the marketplace leveraging those things without people realizing that they're actually leveraging smart, intelligent software into whatever they're using. So to me, this is not a fad. This is something that we've been using. I've invested in a company, not healthcare, but an LLM Gen AI company that was developing their model for 3 years before OpenAI released ChatGPT to the public, right? And that is because we know that we are going to replace the boring jobs, the repetitive tasks that humans are doing behind the computer. What I tell my friends in VC is, if you're looking to come into the VC world as an analyst, don't do that, because the analyst jobs are all going to go away. In a few years, the principal jobs in VC are going to go away, and only the highest level decision-making jobs are going to remain, because everything else will be automated. And I'm looking at automating our due diligence funnel with the help of generative AI as much as I can. So it's happening now. It's not happening 5 years from now.
Exactly.
I think that's a very common misconception. And I think the way that we've been talking about it at Qualio and with other peer CEOs that are in the software world is that it's less of a technology problem right now. I think it's getting somewhat commoditized, actually. It's a use case problem and it's a business transformation problem. So there's 3 things that I think are always true about anything new technology. And for us, it's been about what are the clear ROI, the business outcomes they're trying to solve for customers, and how well can you understand those? For our case, it was all about compliance acceleration and audits. And some of the use cases we're putting in now is to help some of our customers go from taking months to get ready for FDA submission or for a big ISO audit down to days. So that's like a real outcome we've been chasing and pushing for. And with that, people often say it's about automation. It's actually not automation. It's completely fresh and new approach. And if you try and just automate something, you're just going to end up with a mediocre solution that's 1.5 times better. But I think it's about taking completely new ways of working. And with all of that, the third piece is, and our company and everyone I've spoken with is, it's actually an organizational change problem then as well, which is what's the training, what's the support, how do you get people to, find their superpowers with these new technologies and not feel threatened. And that's it. I think the companies that are investing in that as much as everything else are the ones that are seeing success. At least that's, what we've really seen. I'd be curious, Rachna, from your perspective, as you're doing due diligence and assessing companies, how are you trying to determine and measuring companies that are doing this well versus companies that are just, a solution in search of a problem using AI?
Yeah, I mean, that's a $1 trillion question you've just asked there, Rob, right? Because if you will share that, we hope we don't miss stuff. But what's actually happening is, I'll give you an example which makes it very difficult, right? For due diligence, VCs actually tend to reach out to the experts. And if they don't, they should reach out to the experts in the market, because no VC firm has all the experts in-house, big or small, right? So you've got to go out to the experts. Now, I was talking about something in biological computing. And I was talking about industry organization, how US has to lead in this. And I was talking to a tech leader from a big tech company from an era gone by, and he kept talking about distributed compute models. Yes, that's a great place to start, but that's not what biological computing is going to unlock. That's already been done and dusted. And I think that is the challenge when you come to the application layer, is when you're entering an era where new things can be done that have never been unlocked before. Who do you rely on? Whose expertise do you actually rely on? Because some of the older generation can move on and the others are stuck in the models that they created, right? And it's time to move on. So we face a lot of problem. And the way I solve that problem is that I try to work not just with healthcare entrepreneurs, but the latest tech entrepreneurs. And so it's a lot more work for us to do that, because it's organizational change, skill set change. And it doesn't make my job any easy. I don't know if I answered the question or created more questions.
You actually did, because I was going to move on to, okay, well, what are we seeing as the business impacts of some of this? And you touched on pieces of it. I've had the pleasure of connecting with a lot of CEOs here this week as part of my job. But one of the things I've been hearing a lot is that today companies are being expected to accelerate from concept to launch into real revenue way faster than ever before. And they're also being expected to do that with less capital than ever before. So I thought maybe we'd pivot and talk a little bit about what we're seeing from speed gains, efficiency gains, and maybe Jim, I'd love to get your thoughts on this. Is something I know we've spoken about quite a bit.
Yeah, I think software engineering in healthcare has been a really long process for a long time. A typical med device company or a diagnostic or a digital health app might take years to get to market due to audit cycle, software development studios. We're seeing now just with agents being able to type in a prompt and build a fully functional application. You can get the prototype literally in 30 minutes. Bolt new, Replit agent. There's a lot of tools out there that aren't HIPAA compliant that have grown super, super fast. And so now it's expected from a UX designer to actually have a working prototype in the same day, put it in front of a physician, get feedback instantly. And I think that mindset is going away from document-driven design to prototype-driven design. And so we're seeing now the build cycles go 1,000x faster, and then the review cycles, going back to audits, are the stage where we're going to see a lot more things going into the audit phase, and then be a longer review cycle. So we're shifting left a little bit. A lot of responsibility in a lot of roles. A lot of roles are changing. And I think this new class of developer we're thinking about is causing a lot to reflect, how do we get that 1,000x efficiency gain, in our org if we have a lot of software products? And so, yeah, I think it's a new paradigm. And I think there's a lot of industries that this is affecting with agents. I think software and regulated agents are a new area, and I think this is only going to speed up, and I think that the real value is, like, if you can get the idea to revenue in 6 months as opposed to 5 years, it's really going to speed up not only financing, to the point earlier, but business traction, and eventually you might see a lot of self-sustaining profitable businesses that are emerging really quickly, which I think is a really great thing for startups and a great thing for investors if you get it right. It's just the thesis is changing. One of the anecdotes I'll give here is, like, one of the things we do as demos, we pull from venture funds. They're all their portfolio companies in digital health, and we can literally make demos for all their companies that same day. And that's something that's a little crazy if you think about, is if you can literally pull from a name and description of companies, prototypes, it just changes how you think about competitive moat, right? And I wanted to highlight that example as well, because I think that's really the world we live in now. It's getting really easy to reproduce technologies just from a little bit of text. So
I had a thought here. I think I agree with everything that you said, Jim. In addition to that, I think what is happening now with AI and Gen AI is that people are running after the shiny objects. And in healthcare, it is the plumbing, it's the nuts and bolts, it's the non-sexy, dirty work, which if you don't do, you can never pass through the regulations and never really help patients get better or help hospitals become more sustainable or payers have better algorithms. But what happens is, in bigger companies and smaller companies, it's very easy to get a huge marketing budget. It's much harder to get a quality and regulatory budget improved. So these people are going to face higher pressure. And you probably see this, Rob, more often. And so I think hard coding intelligence into the process, helping these people, I am a fan of that kind of plumbing, because that is what actually moves the needle faster. When you talk about founders having less money and having to do more with less, these are the kind of things that can help them, because they can't miss a beat on quality in healthcare. They can't miss a beat on regulation, because it's about people and their lives and their health. And it's important. So maybe you have an opinion. I'm going to throw this back at you.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, a few opinions. I might maybe share what I'm seeing is companies are doing who are getting ahead of this, and then share a Qualio anecdote as well. So there's two things that we've seen in our customer base where they're succeeding and actually gaining advantage. The first is this idea of the software team and the scientist team being not these two separate teams, and it's please build this application interface for this piece of medical device we're building. It's they're actually the one team working together and shared goals. We saw that in DevOps. We see that in a lot of the accelerations in industries the past few decades, and we're seeing this now happen in medtech in particular, and that's really exciting, I think. The second part is for better or worse, my first job was an intern at Pfizer, updating the 3-year review of their standard operating procedures. So I've been there, done some of that, but that was over 20 years ago, and the industry is still a pretty document-centric, reactive SOPs, protocols, submissions. If it didn't document it, it didn't happen, right? We've all heard that if you've been near the industry. That's all well and good, but I think the real asset is the data asset, and companies who are not thinking in documents but are thinking in terms of data as the real asset have a huge advantage. And that's been something we've, through customer discovery and a whole lot of work the last couple of years have been really, last year in particular, really diving into. And the example I would give is one where it's been interesting that we'll talk to CEOs and they might say, yeah, it's working great. We have the regulatory person, a quality person. We have one market this year, one market next year. We're doing fine. But then you probe, and you realize that they just have this assumption that's as fast as you can go because of the complexity and because of this old world, that we've worked very hard to try and break through that. And the last few months, we're now releasing to our customers, we call it a compliance acceleration product offering. And what we're seeing with automatic mapping from frameworks to controls, requirements, to data, to remediation is we've been able to take some of our customers and or even our own internal data and go from months of prep down to days. And really, it's almost minutes, hours, but days is how we talk about it and present it right now. And that from some of our customers is not a cost optimization. And what we heard is, oh, now I can go after both these markets at once, or I can go after 3 markets this year. So it's a revenue acceleration unlock. And in my role, nothing makes you more happy than seeing people feel like they can go further faster. And that's just our example, but there's just tons. And I think there'll be this new class of company that gets a real advantage because of that.
Yeah, I mean, I riff off that. I feel like I like to use Suno.ai as an analogy to healthcare applications. If you look at podcast or just music generation, Suno made it really easy to type in a prompt and make a song. And then whenever people made a lot of songs, they thought, oh, I want to make an album of songs. And I think a lot of companies now are starting to think, how can I create an album of applications? How can I create an album of products to accelerate revenue? And I think we're in this new phase of and a new paradigm, really, to think about how do I create that album that creates net dollar retention revenue in our product portfolio, either diagnostics or digital health applications, patient care portals, whatever it is. But as soon as you get one customer remote, you're seeing people think in albums and be platform companies and think, how do I build that operating system in a way? And I think this is going down to efficiencies. And if you can build 100 applications for the price of one historically, you're going to start seeing really different types of companies emerge. I don't know quite what they'll look like, but it's exciting to see, to say the least.
So that's some of the really fun advantages and possibilities. But because the products that are built by medtech companies save, impact, change lives, there's the regulatory consideration. I'd be really curious, Rachna, to start with you and get your thoughts on how you think you might assess companies from a regulatory strategy, knowing that continuously learning AI models are hard to validate, maybe.
Yeah, somebody asked me a question a few months ago. I'm part of DTX Alliance, which is trying to figure out digital therapeutics and the regulatory space around it. I was like, do you think the med device and AI regulatory body should be the same? And I was like, oh, dear God, I don't even know how to answer that, because in certain cases, I want them to be the same body for efficiency and speed and being able to talk to each other. And in some cases, I want it totally separate, because I don't want the AI mindset to kind of corrupt the medtech, the device side, and the device side to corrupt the AI side. And so I still don't know how to answer that question, because we really are at the infancy of that. And, I always tell AI-enabled med device companies that I'm working with, and we're holding an educational session in April for some of our companies to say, talk to the experts, because there are people who know that while FDA makes up their mind on what they want from you, you could enter the market with a less potent but a consumable version of what you can deliver, and start testing the market and gathering real-world evidence as you build. That may not be an option for every device. It can happen a lot with Class 1 kind of devices, right, if you think about it. Definitely not the case for Class 3 devices. But then there are other devices. I'll give an example of a company some of you might have heard about, not in my portfolio, Cardiacare, right? They have a device that measures your vitals, and it does closed-loop treatment. And prevention. They're not calling it treatment, they're calling it prevention, because treatment comes with its own labels of regulations and what you have to show in data and all of that. But the era of closed loop devices that are measuring your vitals and changing something in your body to actually rectify whatever challenge in health you're facing, we are facing that era, whether we like it or not, right? I see this as a classic fight that I had with my mother, the intergenerational fight. And then now my son is 15, he's having with me on certain topics. And we just have to learn to be comfortable with it and accept it for what it is without feeling threatened. Right? As a parent, you don't have to feel threatened. As a kid, you don't have to feel threatened. We're just different generations existing together. And I'm the classic sandwich generation where I'm still fighting my mom and my kid. And so, yeah, I mean, be open is the mantra that I have, because if you're not open, we're going to miss out on amazing opportunities to improve human health, lead the pathway to prevention, and actually have less stress on the hospital systems, because, giving a surgery for everything is not the only option to proper health. I don't believe in that. Holistic health is more than that. And devices are not just for cutting open people. They can be for prevention as well. And that's a very different mind shift, I would say.
Not sure, Jim, if you might want to add to that. I have some thoughts.
Well, I just think the pace, just this coming from personal experience, my brother had treatment-resistant schizophrenia. He was hospitalized, went in and out 8 times. He committed suicide a few years ago. So very tragic in my family. And I just look at the pace of that area, suicidality, schizophrenia. Look at that over 50 years. What has changed? So to me, my perspective is like these new things could potentially speed up a literature search on all papers related to schizophrenia, literally create a list of all possible treatment mechanisms, outcomes-based care, readmission rates, create a report, create a digital health app based on the cutting-edge research, get a physician in the loop, maybe 5 leading psychiatrists in the world to review the research of those topics, build a functional application in 7 days, go through maybe an observational study in 5 weeks through collaborations with the right hospitals, and really show like real impact in 3 months. And to me, that's what's driving me here. But I think that like this is the change I want to see. It's more like why are we here? So help us build that. I don't know how to build that, but I ask everyone here to try to build that, to move faster. We have to move faster for people like my brother or people like my wife's a pediatric oncologist. 100% fatality rate in DIPG, in brain tumors and cancers of kids. We got to do better, right? And what I'm saying is I believe strongly that these new things, especially these new technologies, we can move faster. And by moving faster, we more experiments. And by more experiments, some of those will work faster. So to me, it's kind of like high throughput screening of things. If we can get more throughput, then it's kind of like selecting the protein or hit. Same thing now with software. And to me, that's exciting. And also, I think can drive a lot of impact if rooted in the right science, right, in the right panels. And I personally think FDA, with all the changes in administration happening right now, is going to move slowly. It's our responsibility as private companies to start coming up and creating the right review panels on new endpoints that may not exist yet. And this is one area like maybe not exist yet. So maybe 10 psychiatrists are the leading in the world ones to review this, for example. So yeah, a lot to work through there. I'm just trying to say the disruption coming and how do we work through that, right?
Thanks, Jim. I think it's pretty clear that the FDA and auto regulatory bodies, ignoring some of the current disruption that's happening there, realize that companies who are trying to deploy 20 times a day to production as they're iterating fast, or they have continuously learning AI models, or insert all the things the technology companies are trying to do today, they realize that it doesn't really work. The status quo and how they've done it. We see across our customers, there's hope for the future, but it's very much a transitional point, and that's pretty challenging. I do think the changes the FDA have come out with around shifting to more quality assurance, more process-based, more risk-based, rather than point in time and super documentation heavy, is a really big long-term optimistic view. But I think right now companies are struggling a lot, and even at Qualio, we've wrestled with this for an awful long time. We were the first company in the industry to move to a continuously validated GXP software deployment model. We deployed thousands of times to production last year, but that was something that was a number one priority for a large team of people for an awful long time. And even now with AI, as we're bringing out these features, our team have been partnered up with Amazon Web Services, Bedrock Life Sciences team, figuring out how we can deploy those in production in heavily regulated environments. So we're hoping we can take those learnings to our customers, but nobody has it really figured out yet. So I aspire to everything you've said, and I think it's the people who are here get to kind of push. I think the one thing we can't do is just go, let's keep going slow because somebody will eat your breakfast who will figure it out beforehand competitively. But also, everybody here wants to build a great business. People here typically also have a mission. So I think it behooves everybody to keep pushing rather than just shrug the shoulders. And I've seen a lot of people very much trying to push that here this week. Which maybe might be a good time to pivot and look a little bit forward. I'm curious as to how you folks might see next 12 months, because everything changes very fast. I'm curious what you're excited about happening and changing right now in this area. I think Jim might want to go first, or Rachna, you want to go?
I'll let you go first.
Okay. Oh, wow. I think there's a lot of innovation leveraging AI happening in healthcare, medtech, life sciences in general. The areas that excite me are the things that will prevent hospitals from shutting down and make them more profitable, because, there has to be a place for caregiving. The parts that can actually move to home health, and there's a lot of work to be done there, but AI is going to play a pivotal role in managing all the data that is being collected at home for the patient, for the family, consumers in general, and then how that integrates with health systems and their providers, and what it does, what that data can actually do, what regulation will allow it to do. And given the current regulatory situation, I don't have an answer in which direction it's going to move and how fast it's going to move there. But that's an area to watch out for, because it's coming. The second thing is, I think I'm excited that innovation can happen faster with startups, because they can do with these AI support services a lot more in shorter periods of time, faster time frames, and with better outcomes. Right? Whether it's the quality regulatory frameworks, they can move it faster, whether they know how to port the clinical trial data from one country to the other country's requirements and stuff like that. All of that with the help of AI can be done much faster, which means that the speed of innovation, whether it's the speed of launch or speed of failure, is going to be faster. And that's good, because not everything is going to succeed. There is going to be failure in innovation, like there's always been. We're just going to get to it cheaper and faster. And that is exciting, because that means more money will go broader into innovation in general. And so medtech might become actually more affordable, and we could see the return of medtech investors, because we're kind of a dying breed if you think about it.
Maybe there's a more provocative question around that then, which is what do we think is happening with the arrival of the non-healthcare investor into this industry? Because that's been a huge force, I think, the last couple of years. I think you each might have differing opinions, so I'd love to hear how you think about that, and how that's reshaping for good or for bad.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of new tech-inspired funds that are investing. Andreessen Horowitz's new biofund, for example, and VJ in there, and a lot of the other funds that are forming our investors are more tech-inspired investors. And I would say that that's opportunistic for healthcare. One, it will create more capital into the healthcare ecosystem. Gen AI budgets in healthcare from Menlo Ventures report $500 million last year in spend. It's the highest spend category out of every industry in Gen AI. So this industry attracting more venture funding is going to be net positive for capital efficient startups. And to me, really exciting. And I also think separately, it's just going to create more innovation in places like science, right? How do you do science in this field? I brought up the deep research example because science is going to change. Google Scientist just was released. How is that going to change what it means to be a scientist? I think these questions, especially with recent budget changes, like you just look at the budget changes happening, I think it's going to cause a new wave of science and innovation that trickles into startups. I don't know quite the way that looks, but it excites me because these tech investors may be that vehicle to spawn that investment to work on things that are net new. And we need net new things. Going back to my brother's story, the things we've been doing have not been working all the time in every industry. So to me, it's exciting. I don't know all the answers, but I can say that the investors that I've seen in the tech space are opening up a lot of doors for distribution channels. They're connected to a lot of other funds. They're really good at growth-based marketing, as well as access to specific patient communities that they're tied to. So they have some value to add, I can say, in my experience.
The way I'm tackling this is I've started creating think tanks on AI-enabled healthcare outcomes, invitation only. I bring tech investors, hospital systems, payers, healthcare investors, entrepreneurs together, very limited capacity, but to have really deep discussions about, and in one of the keynote chats in that discussion, the head of venture investments from a big hospital system said, look, we're a big, giant animal, and we move very quickly. If you really want to work with us, try coming in with smaller innovations. Mm-hmm. You can't replace Epic as a small startup today. And that's the very realistic view of things. But if you start chipping off at the edges and you prove your value, you're working with us, you're already a vendor to us, then pitching the next solution on the platform is much easier. And I think that was very pragmatic advice, because I don't think a 70 hospital system is going to throw out Epic and start using that, small startup software as the EHR, EMR, ERP software. That's not happening today. It may happen in a couple of decades, but it's not happening today. So I think practical advice on how do you invest. And I feel like industries tend to work in silos. So have the best AI tech investors work with the best health tech investors, especially at the early stage, because the magic has to begin there. So I host these think tanks because I think we need to learn from each other and we can't be isolated.
Well, thank you both for volunteering your time here at the chat today. I've enjoyed it. I hope everybody here has as well. I know we're going to be next door chatting for a little bit after this, so we'd really welcome the chance to follow up with anybody who's got any follow-ups or is interested in talking about the topic generally. Thank you both, and for everybody here at LSI who helped facilitate this. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yes.